Greetings. This is Paul the Poke from PaulthePoke.com. This time, I'd like to take opportunity to welcome everyone to This Week in Prophecy. I've been on break for a little bit, had some family in town, then got a little under the weather. So it's been a little bit. So welcome everybody back. Tried to do something Sunday, didn't work out with Checkmate for the Watchmen. So we'll stick with This Week in Prophecy. Tried to reach out to Checkmate tonight. He's got things going on with his family, so we'll get it all figured out and get back together at some point. But nonetheless, we still have things happening around the planet, and we're going to start in the Philippines, on the northern part of the island Luzon. We had a big 7.3, 7.0 revised earthquake at the posting of this video vlog post, etc. 5 people had passed and dozens were injured. And before we get into some of the other details, just want to take a look at let's look at Luke 21 verse 10. And this is Jesus talking. And again, just think of this verse in the context of what we're going to cover of the news that's happened, is happening within the last day or two, last week, continues to happen. I mean, at this point, these aren't one-off events. These are, these aren't, events in isolation. These are patterns, continuations. These are long-standing stories in some cases. Nation will rise against nation and kingdom against kingdom. I mean, here we go. Wars, rumors of wars, take your pick. Nations against nations, kingdoms against kingdoms. I mean, that is clearly going on. Great earthquakes continue to trend upward. We're having more and more of these various places, and famines. We're going to talk about some more food supply issues. It's becoming a consistent story on This Week in Prophecy and the Watchmen, and also pestilences. We're going to talk about pestilences as well. So again, think of these comments by Jesus made a little over 2,000, or right at 2,000 years ago, and take into consideration what we are seeing in our daily headlines. And I'd offer this up to the critic. First of all, what Jesus said, why would anybody care what somebody wandering around the desert of modern day Israel 2,000 years ago said? Why would anybody care what some man had to say about things that he thought was going to take place in the future? And then why would anybody take the time to write down what he said, let alone, 4 to 6 people wrote plenty about what he said? And then how did all that stuff manage to survive the test of time of 2,000 years? And people have kept track of it. Just how did all that happen? And doesn't that at least give you a little bit of pause for thought? And, you guys are just fighting like hell to shut him down and shut him up. But yet his words keep ringing true. Things keep happening the way he said they would happen. And it's becoming more and more evident that, well, maybe there's something to some of the things he had to say, or all of the things he had to say, frankly. And they are being laid out before our time here in the, the first part of the 21st century. And I would offer you all this challenge, all you critics out there, go make some proclamations and, I don't know, look down the corridors of time and project out something you think's going to happen. Let's say you pick out something around the year 4000. Where do you think we're going to be? Make some proclamations. Where are we going to be? Use all that great insight and knowledge that you've been lecturing us about. Put it to good use. Come on, let's make some predictions. Place your bets. What's going to happen? And then maybe, do you think anything you have to say will survive the test of time in 2,000 years? Do you think anything you have to say is going to be there in 2,000 years? Just something for the critic to think about. I digress. Let's get back to the Philippines. This was from PM Breaking News. Damage reported at the Bantay Watchtower in Vigan, Philippines. 7.3 earthquake. And this is on like a loop. It's about a 39-second loop. This is about done, but you can see this thing shaking, and it is just creating powder from how hard that's shaking. It's getting ready to start over here in about a second. And watch part of this building fall apart. Watch chunks of it falling off the tower. There's some more. I mean, this thing was significantly damaged. Don't know if it was completely destroyed, but I don't know that I'd be walking around that tower anytime soon. I kept the audio down, but people are obviously a little nervous about what's going on. A couple of them want to go up there and get a little closer, but they don't want to get too close. I kind of like the idea of the person here at a distance and just filming it. I think this was built in like the late 1500s. Right. So what are we talking? Rounded up 1600. We're talking around 430 years old or so. But you can just see how strong. You can see even the trees are shaking. Be quite the experience. So we have earthquakes in various places, and we have the newest. What hasn't been the newest, but this will be the latest, greatest healthcare craze. We have monkeypox. So we had earthquakes. We have pestilences. Okay, so here's a pestilence. And this appears to be the newest pestilence on the global scale. WHO declares rapidly spreading monkeypox outbreak a global health emergency. The last global health emergency in January 2020 was in response to COVID-19. So here we are, 2.5 years later. Here's the second one. Now, Dr. Tedros, the gentleman who is the World Health Organization chief, said that the global risk is moderate, but the threat is high in Europe. Also says monkeypox is unlikely to disrupt international trade or travel right now. Of course, it's what they say. Now, there's some politics involved with this. Also, the UN declined last month to declare a global emergency because of monkeypox. But because infections have increased substantially over the past several weeks, WHO Director General Tedros issued a high alert. Now, keep in mind, this was not included in the report, but Dr. Tedros, Director General Tedros, never mind. I'm not even going to go there. Director General Tedros of the WHO also overruled the committee vote. And it says, they kind of get at it backdoor. The committee was unable to reach a consensus on whether or not the monkeypox constitutes an emergency. Well, he made the decision. They had voted no. There was a plurality of them that said no. And he voted to declare it. So there's that. He justifies his position. We have an outbreak that has spread around the world rapidly through new modes of transmission about which we understood too little. For all of the reasons, I've decided the global monkeypox outbreak represents a public health emergency of international concern. So we're looking at about 16,000 cases of monkeypox over 70 countries. 77 infections rose 77% from June to July. Men who have sex with men are currently at highest risk for infection. Current monkeypox is highly unusual because it's spreading widely in North American and European nations where the virus is not easily found or not usually found. And then I need to get down here to the political aspects of this and the wokeness, the political correctness now of this disease. I know for those of you who have been following, we have been told this is not a sexually transmitted disease. It's not. Similar, same virus as smallpox. It's a milder disease. It's been relatively rare in the past. The virus jumped from animals to humans, but monkeypox is now spreading more efficiently between people. And this is the political aspect of this, and we're going to be talked to by the WHO. Primarily spreading through skin-to-skin contact during sex. Men who have sex with men are at highest risk now. Majority of transmission has occurred in the gay community. However, the WHO and the CDC have emphasized that anyone can catch monkeypox regardless of sexual orientation. And that is the piece of that is that as this spreads, there will be more people, innocent people, who have not engaged in skin-to-skin contact during sex who can become infected because of the actions of others who have done that. So it is true that your actions, your doings, dealings do have consequences unknowingly to some people. And that would make, those people responsible for their actions and how it affects other people, even indirectly. Still trying to iron out whether or not the virus can be spread through semen during sex. We don't know about that. Spanish scientists have detected monkeypox in saliva. Lewis, where is Lewis? I missed Lewis's whole name. He's the WHO's monkeypox expert. 99% of cases reported outside of Africa are among men. 98% of infections are among men who have sex with men, primarily those who've had multiple recent anonymous or new sexual partners. Virus has been detected outside the gay community, but transmission has been low so far. Now, this is what's important that needs to be emphasized by the WHO and the CDC, have repeatedly warned against stigmatizing gay and bisexual men while at the same time stressing the importance of communicating the reality of how the virus is currently spreading so people in communities at highest risk can take action to protect their health. People want the information to know how to protect themselves and what circumstances are people perhaps at risk or getting infected. Okay. Tedros, leader of the WHO, Tedros, warns stigma and discrimination are violations of human rights that will undermine the public health response to the outbreak. He called on national governments to protect individuals' fundamental right as they respond to the virus. We seek your strong commitment to uphold human dignity, human rights, so that we can control this outbreak. Well, I would offer up to Mr. Tedros, what about certain sects of our society and individuals of society control their behavior so that they don't affect other people? That is also an option. It's not one that's being discussed, but it is pretty clear that, for those who are not engaging in male to male, skin to skin sexual contact, this seems to be where this is primarily taking place at a, 98% of infections are among men who have sex with men, primarily those who've had multiple recent anonymous or new sexual partners. I mean, we seem to be identifying how this is spreading. What about their responsibility to the population of the world at large? Their behavior is affecting other people. True statement. Just something to think about there, WHO. Not that you care what an anonymous blogger has to say about it, but it is something that does need to be taken into consideration, and that the actions of others put the health and safety of the population at large in danger. Revelation 16. So the first bowl, let's put this in context. The first bowl, this is the last of the seven. There are 3 series of judgments in the book of Revelation. The bowl judgments, these are the last bowls. These are the last 7. And this is the first of those 7 judgments. So the first went out and poured out his bowl upon the earth, and a foul and loathsome sore came upon the men who had the mark of the beast and those who worshipped his image. Now, granted, context of this is at least the back third of the tribulation. So for those of you who are not familiar with the current position of this website, it is of my opinion that we are not in the tribulation. We have not begun. We have no temple. We've not seen 2 witnesses. We don't have an Antichrist. Jerusalem is not surrounded. I mean, there are many things that have not happened. So we're not there yet. But I do find this judgment interesting. And am I saying that monkeypox is the fulfillment, will be the fulfillment of this? No, I'm not saying that. I'm just looking at what Scripture says. I'm looking at our current headlines. And then I'm looking, is this plausible? Does this make sense? Is this something that could go there? I don't know. I'll let you all make your own determination on that. But this judgment is described as loathsome, or kakon in the Greek, bad, evil in the widest sense, worthless, depraved, injurious. Loathsome, another word, is malignant. Poneron, evil, bad, wicked, malicious, slothful. Sores, helkos, a festering sore, a wound, an ulcer. Interesting. Here's what the stuff looks like. Now, don't get me wrong, there are plenty of other things out there that match this description. And this is reserved for those people who are going to worship the Antichrist. They take his mark. So that's one of the judgments that they get before they are thrown into an eternal lake of fire, is they get to go through a loathsome, malignant sore that breaks out on them. And why? Because they worship they worship the beast. They take the mark of the beast. So just chew on it. Anyway. And with that, we spent a lot of time talking about food security, and we get that from Revelation 6. We'll jump to that real quick, specifically verse 6. And this is BibleHub.com for those of you who are not familiar. It's a very handy tool. And these are the conditions at the outset of the tribulation. Again, I don't think we're in the tribulation. Verses prior to this talk about a quarter of the earth's, or the context of these verses, a quarter of the earth population will perish. You got war breaking out. You got famine breaking out. And then economically, we're looking at a quart of wheat for a denarius and 3 quarts of barley for a denarius. Do not harm the oil and wine. Well, a denarius is a day's wage. So the price of food will inflate to the point where it will cost a day's wage just to feed a family. And so what you're looking at there is the ability to produce grain food, or if you converted all that to bread, you'd be looking at about 3 or 4 loaves of bread, wheat and barley. And the point is, there will be food security issues leading into the onset of the tribulation. Conditions will rise to where it will, as the tribulation kicks off, will cost you a day's wage to eat. And we have food security issues taking place on this planet. And we're going to cover a couple of those. And this is from our friends north of the border. Prime Minister Trudeau moves forward with fertilizer reduction climate policy. And this is from thecountersignal.com. And Prime Minister Justin Trudeau has decided to move forward with his cap on nitrogen emissions by reducing fertilizer use, even as provincial agricultural ministers beg him to stop. Keep in mind, roughly, 79% of our air is nitrogen. Okay. I mean, let's just ban air. And I know we're talking about the fertilizer, but this is just getting silly. This is becoming silly. And especially, he has to look around the world and see what's going on. And this is a quote from Alberta Agriculture Minister Nate Horner. This has been the most expensive crop anyone has put in following a very difficult year on the prairies. The world is looking for Canada to increase production and be a solution to global food shortages. The federal government needs to display that they understand this. They owe it to our producers. Well, he sees it, but he doesn't care. I mean, he's choosing his policies over the food security of others. There's just no other way to put this. Trudeau government unveiled their new climate plan with a focus on reducing nitrous oxide emissions from fertilizer by 30% below 2020 levels by 2030. Plan's starting to come into effect. And they don't want to go that way. Now, here's the impact of it. This is from Fertilizer Canada. Total emission reductions puts a cap on the total emissions allowable from fertilizer at 30% below 2020 levels. As the yield of Canadian crops is directly linked to the proper fertilizer application, this creates a ceiling on Canadian agricultural productivity well below 2020 levels. 30% absolute emission reduction for a farmer with 1,000 acres of canola and 1,000 acres of wheat stands to have their profit reduced by $38,000 on the canola side, $40,500 on the wheat side. So, if you're that farmer who has 1,000 acres of both, I mean, that's going to cost you about 80 grand. 2020, Western Canadian farmers planted 20.8 million acres of canola. It's going to have a reduction of, give or take 396 million to 441 million on an annual basis. Wheat farmers could experience a reduction of 400 million, so we're pushing $800 million. Assuming this is probably Canadian dollars. Either way, that's a significant hit. And I think, and this is what some of the people are just starting to wonder out loud. And these are the farmers talking and some of the people critical of these policies. And by the way, these policies are following the same line of thinking that's taken place over in Europe, in the Netherlands. That's what this was all about. They were talking about some of the fertilizer policies and different green policies that were affecting the farmers, the production, distribution of their goods. And Canada's just following suit. And so you got Trudeau's government's moving forward, farmer groups speaking to Farmers Forum now wondering if he's intentionally trying to cause a food shortage, which Trudeau has told Canadians to prepare for. Okay. Is what it is. Again, there's another example, less food to distribute, going to increase the cost of it, going to cost more money to go buy groceries. Now, as that happens, a deal struck on the Ukraine grain exports, and this is from RT, this is from Russia Times. This is what they want us to hear. A deal to unblock much awaited grain exports from Ukraine was signed at the UN brokered talks in Istanbul, Turkey on Friday. Joint Coordination Center in Istanbul to oversee shipments from Ukraine and to maintain safe transit routes from those shipments across the Black Sea. Keep in mind that the Bosphorus Straits and the Dardanelles Straits are controlled by Turkey. And so we got all these folks together. It's a beacon. Guterres, this is the head UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres, described the signing as a, quote, a beacon of relief in a world that needs it more than ever. And he thanked President Recep Erdogan for his persistence and thought it was great that the Russians and Ukrainians put aside their differences for the sake of the world food supply, specifically in the developing countries. UN Secretary Guterres warned in March that delays in shipments of wheat from Ukraine and Russia could lead to a hurricane of hunger and meltdown on the global food system. Well, I will maintain this. I don't think this little signing solves any problems. When you have 3 of the top 10 wheat producers in the world, when you have Russia, Ukraine, and India saying they're hanging on to their grains, that's going to impact. And they account for close to 35-40% of global exports of grain. And now we're saying we've got this little agreement that's going to allow some of this stuff to pass through the Black Sea. And so that's the Russian spin on it. And then this is from Al Monitor. They say U.S. Russia agree to sign deal in Istanbul to end grain crisis. This is not going to end the grain crisis. I mean, this is like a little pinprick. I mean, what they're not showing you is that somebody, Lord knows who it is, Russians are probably doing some of it, Ukrainians are doing some of it, and then you got the neo-Nazi types down there in the southeastern part of the Ukraine doing some of it, but they're going in there and placing mines in wheat fields, blowing up tractors and combines, setting some of these fields on fire. I mean, so we got that piece of it, and then they're going to have to turn around here in a couple, 3 months and plant crops to get ready for the next season. I mean, so clearly this season, this harvest season is being impacted. There's just no question about that. And because we have some piece of paper that's been signed, allows for the safe export of Ukrainian grain tomorrow, averting a looming food crisis. It doesn't avert anything. And then they follow that up. The Russians follow that up by going and bombing a seaport in Odessa, where these grains are supposed to be allowed to be exported. So, on one hand, we're going to sign a piece of paper, and then on another, the next day, we're going to turn around and go bomb a port. I mean, watch what they do, not what they say. Again, another action that would lead to pressure on food supply and prices. I don't see anything really changing there. Now, the Turks, to their credit, fruit of Erdogan's diplomacy and presidency, we will continue our efforts to resolve this conflict. Okay. And they've been fighting since February, so going on 5 months. And so we also, transition, and this would be Ezekiel 38's crew. This would be Russia, Turkey, and let's also look what Russia's doing. All that's going on in Ukraine, Russia is spreading their sphere of influence to Africa, and specifically using the Wagner mercenary groups, the hired military groups, Mozambique, Mali, Central African Republic, Libya, stepped up arms sales to other continent regimes, and they are looking to impose their influence internationally significantly on the continent of Africa. And this is a Checkmate had sent me this, elonberman.com. And this guy's main observation is that we've been watching Eastern Europe and what they're doing in Ukraine. Nobody's paying attention what they're doing in Africa. And short read, worth the time. This would be a good thing. This is where Checkmate can break these things down and present it in ways I don't understand, and how this is affecting the international scene. My thing would be to watch, especially when Russia gets involved in Libya, Sudan, Ethiopia. Those are the hot spots according to Scripture, and so we do want to keep an eye on those. And we also want to see, if they're going to be in Africa, they're going to eventually affect those countries. So not only is Russia making its move into Eastern Europe, they're in Africa. And oh, by the way, let's get together with China and let's see if we can establish a new global reserve currency. Well, everybody in this article talks about Russia and China. For those of you not familiar with the BRICS countries, that would also include Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. And they are all collectively working on their own new global reserve currency. And again, this was out of Russia Times, late June of this year, 2022. Guarantee nobody saw this reported in our Western press. Because as the Western press sees it, the dollar is the dominant reserve currency on the planet, and they don't seem threatened. Our press, our economic press, doesn't seem threatened by the idea of the BRICS countries getting together to form their own basket of currencies and having a new global reserve currencies. Because all these countries get it. They're hostage to the dollar and our manipulation of the dollar. And we use the dollar as a weapon, and these folks are tired of it. Russia's been cut off from the SWIFT system as a result of the invasion into Ukraine. But, they decided to pair up with China, and the BRICS nations developed a reliable alternative mechanism for international payments. That way they don't have to be reliant on the Western financial system. And they're looking to reroute trade to China and India from Russia. Looking for reliable international partners. And as far as Putin's got to see it, it's paying off for him. Fine, you want to sanction us? We'll move our trade elsewhere. we will send our resources east to China and India. And oh, by the way, there are more people in China and India than there are in Europe. They have close to 3.6 billion customers in India and China alone. Those two countries cover 35-40% of the population of the planet. And all they ask is, okay, well, let's just trade in a reserve currency or pay us in rubles or pay us in commodities. We'll peg these things to gold or peg these things to whatever commodity price we agree to and just establish trade that way. And guess what? Russia's making more than what they were working with Western economies. So, and you can see the teeth of these sanctions. I mean, Russia's signed deals with Iran. They're in the process of doing this with China, Brazil, India, South Africa. It's working well for them. Something to keep an eye on. And in the backdrop of all this, you have the Saudis who are talking out loud and mentioning the fact they are considering maybe making some payments of oil in yuan. That'd be the Chinese currency. So I wouldn't be surprised if these groups get together and try to establish or form an international currency to allow for free trade and business between these countries. And I suspect, if anybody else who's willing, convert what you have in dollars to whatever it is they decide to try to work out, you could do business with them as well. You can see this coming. We're not talking about it. Chairman Powell mentioned it briefly, sees that the landscape of global economics is changing rapidly. Well, you better believe it is. But, we could wake up one morning and the price of oil could be through the roof. Natural gas be through the roof. Food costs be through the roof over something like a new emerging rival reserve currency is what this is talking about. And I know this seemed like crazy talk a few years ago, but I mean, here we are, July 23rd, and you've got the two most populous countries on the planet looking to get involved with this, with the support of Russia and India and South Africa. So do be aware. And speaking of the People's Republic over there in China, this was from Wall Street Silver on Twitter, but this is all over the place. So tanks are being put on the streets in China to protect the banks. And this is because the Henan branch of the Bank of China declaring that people's savings in their branch are now investment products and cannot be withdrawn. So can you imagine? Here we go. We got some video of the tanks surrounding the bank. Can you imagine? Say you have a bank account, Wells Fargo, Bank of America, JP Morgan, one of the big Wall Street banks. You got your money in there. And then all of a sudden, there's like a mobilization of military equipment. And they surround all these banks, or they freeze your assets on the internet. And that's been done in Canada, by the way. And that's being done here in China. And then these banks tell you at the recommendation of the government, this money that you've saved and placed in our banks, these are now investment products, and you cannot do that. These are now our property. And all that money that you worked and earned and saved, you don't have access to that anymore, and it's not yours. Can you imagine what that would be like? That's what's going on in China. Had some of this nonsense going on in Canada to some level. Don't think it can't happen here. I mean, we're watching things happen here we've never seen happen. Just want to pay attention. Appreciate y'all taking the time to watch. Please feel free to share with others at PaulthePoke.com. Hope you enjoyed this. Hope y'all have a great evening. Catch up with you later. Bye.